Good morning, and welcome once more to Judging by the Cover, the gaming review show where I review games that I have not played and I'll score them based on the store pages. Now, like the last couple of weeks, I would like to preface this review with a call to our humanity and compassion for each other. For those of you standing up to the powers that would see the kinds of settings shown in this month's games to be made into reality, do what you need to in order to get home safely to your family and loved ones. Now we move on to We Happy Few by Compulsion Games. And if you've been following for a while, you may remember a review for the game South of Midnight, also from the studio. Though looking up Compulsion Games on Steam does turn up a lot more results of what appear to be smaller projects, but even the cursory look does show that this studio appears to have a bit of a robust and diverse studio and catalog with their hands in a lot of things. So I honestly have some high hopes for this. Released in August of 2018, I do recall some buzz around We Happy Few when it came out, though admittedly, it still flew under my radar at the time. So the most that I've seen of this has been maybe a few minutes of early parts of the game in Let's Play style videos. So I am going into this mostly blind, which per usual, is probably the ideal for exactly the kind of review that we want to do. Part one of our review, we're going to go ahead and start by looking at our trailers. Our first trailer comes in at us in an expected format with a cinematic presentation of a street in a very British inspired city. After passing a crime scene, we see a presumably main character taking his pill in front of other townspeople before trying to hide the fact that he's spitting it out, setting up a story premise for the officers who spot him. Skipping past this, a chemist is being assaulted by other agents and she fights back, followed by a bit more of a drive-by flash through scenes where it seems to be three specific main characters converging in a kind of shared story of running from the law or outright fighting back against the powers of this society. The Accolades trailer is accompanied with praise heaped onto it from various sources, and not only from gaming journalist groups, but from online content creators like Jacksepticeye. You know, after I get through this review, I might actually go and just check out some of those YouTubers' old stuff of this, because it'll be years old by this point, but they're still going to be on their YouTube channels. The following trailer after that is the story trailer, which is honestly one of the most gripping introductions that sets up the setting of this world. As it turns out, society has rejected truth in favor of happiness born from an altered state of mind, complete with masks that plaster a smile onto your face and our bearded friend, seen in the previous trailer as a major combatant against the police, has no interest in living this lie and swallowing his joy in pill form. Other protagonists, possibly a couple, I'm kind of getting the vibe of here, they're shown discussing their own solidarity in refusing their drugs while trying to blend in unnoticed. Clearly, the writing is on the wall, splattered on the sidewalks, and hung from raised signs why this game was chosen for this month. Now, further down the line, we do have our third trailer, a longer one that entices us with a trip into the game's graphics, heading into a health institute where we are strapped into a chair and narrated along a journey into a world where people are drugged, kept in perpetual state of happiness, forgetting the past and focusing only on the good in life. Anything sad or mentally distressing is apparently a threat to society, and it feels a bit like a mix of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and George Orwell's 1984, with the way that we're set into this lab in a kind of mental reprogramming that they're trying to force onto this protagonist, onto this POV character. Each one seems to kind of have their own background, each of these characters that get introduced, and their own skill set that each of them uses as downers, as they're classified, to, I'm going to guess, attempt to escape this dystopian nightmare of a world and society they're held in. I imagine maybe there's some hope of escaping the city and living outside of the walls and barriers and autocracy of this culture and society. We are treated to the promise of collecting items, crafting weaponry in this world in order to fight off the joy filled masses. There's stealth gameplay, illegal activity, food and illness, skill trees, side quests, and drugs that warp your character's perception of reality itself. Finally, with our last trailer, we get to the original announcement trailer, which serves roughly the same purpose and conveys the same tone and atmosphere as the others, but in a way that doesn't simply recycle the rest of the footage we've seen. Overall, each of these trailers does an honestly amazing job of piecing together the dystopian themes and reality of this life and the drug addled stupor that society lives in. There's a foreboding sense of panic across all of them, survival and rebellion littered throughout each of the main characters' storylines and presentations. That honestly, whether it was a game or even just a movie or a series, every one of these trailers has done a fantastic job of dragging me in with the expressiveness of the characters, the animations, the movement, and everything. It's not overly realistic, but it's not overly cartoonish either. They convey their tone and their purpose very well with that. So let's move on to part two, screenshots. Now, this game does not give us a lot of screenshots to go off of. There's 5 total on this main page. Now, there is DLC, which we'll get into later, and each of them has their own about a minute long trailer, minute to minute and a half trailer, and their own screenshots. And we'll get into that discussion down the line. But for now, these 5 screenshots pretty much do an all right job of just conveying what to expect here. We see a moment of combat where we are surrounded by spectators, including ones in police hats. So none of them are wearing masks, though. So I'm wondering if this is like a collective of downers trying to bash each other in. Maybe we'll see more about that when we get to the description. Otherwise, it does kind of lead me into wondering about the gameplay. We see a shot here of a downer breach, a police investigation of a man felled in the streets with a weapon. It seems to be a homemade weapon. I can't tell quite if that's one of our main characters or somebody else entirely, considering that the police probably do have their hands full outside of the 3 main casts that we've seen. So, this is apparently a running issue in the city. We see this robot in the middle of a town square, just absolutely overbearing and staring you down. We also see the same character in some of the trailers, looming over you, talking to you. There's some kind of whole motif here. Very Big Brother 1984 vibes that we have going on here. There is a Simon Says game. One of the trailers does mention the scientists or the doctors that were working on you were going to be late for Simon Says. So this does appear to be a bit of a prominent thing in their world. Another setting, more characters without masks, a bit of the helmets and lights going on. Basically, each one of these screenshots is just showing a very small capsule of the situation that we have going on, which brings us right into part 3 of our review, the store description. Now, the description, we're going to scroll past the DLC for now and go right down to about this game. There's a little bit, there's quite a bit here because the game does appear, going back to what I mentioned with the game mostly flying under my radar back in 2018. I think one of the things that left me kind of wondering about it was since I had only seen that little bit of it, like the little bit of opening gameplay that didn't really explain much going on from what I did see, or maybe I was seeing like demos of it and not even the full game. Either way, I didn't see enough in that gameplay to draw me in. I'm sure if I had seen the trailers, would probably have been a different story altogether. It probably would have drawn me in had I actually looked into the game, checked its content, and everything like that. But it does appear here that based on the impression I had in 2018 from only having seen that little bit of Let's Play footage, compared to what I'm seeing here, that there is a lot more game than what I had originally thought. And the description really feeds into that. We Happy Few is the tale of a plucky bunch of moderately terrible people trying to escape from a lifetime of cheerful denial in the city of Wellington Wells. In this alternative 1960s England, conformity is key. You will have to fight or blend in with the drug addled inhabitants, most of whom don't take kindly to people who won't abide by their not so normal rules. Discover the retrofuturistic city's dark history as you play through the intertwined narratives of three quietly rebellious citizens of Wellington Wells. I did mention that it looked like they were presenting us with three main characters, and the trailers did a really good job of highlighting those three individuals, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, as we also saw in the trailers, as they face their pasts, prepare for the future, and engage in activities that aren't exactly status quo in the artificially enthused society. Retrofuturistic 1960s England, set in this England, you will find a city ravaged by war and rebuilt by delusionally happy people. Everything appears joyful in Wellington Wells, including its roads, its people, and its omnipresent television personality, Uncle Jack. But it's actually a world on the brink of collapse. Come unveil its dark history and discover how and why its residents came to be so beguilingly happy. Again, this goes right into the kind of 1984 level of control. Like I said, mixed in with a little bit of that Brave New World, drug addled sense of reality. Now, in those settings, society was very clearly not about to collapse, but it did very much have that overbearing level of control over the world, uh, such as Uncle Jack being a complete parallel of Big Brother, as this media figurehead that basically draws in the masses and I guess is their comfort figure that they herald as some kind of supreme leader or supreme voice of reason. Three interwoven narratives. You play as three flawed characters who explore their own connections to the events surrounding the rebuilding of Wellington Wells. They each have a unique storyline in which they interpret and react to the events around them in different ways. As you hide, conform, or fight back as each of them, you will encounter dark humor, a spot of hope, and even some redemption along the way. So, the way that they paint this, where these are clearly flawed characters, but each of them also seems to have a larger important role in what caused society to go the direction it did. Now, the one lanky character, I'm not entirely certain on his role. The trailers made him look almost like a bystander or a citizen that seemed more caught up in the situation, but I'm sure that actually playing through the game and getting invested in the story will reveal more about him. The female character, the chemist, who is seen using a spray and an injection to subdue enemies. I imagine she likely has something to do with the production and creation of the joy pills that has society going. And given that she is currently in the process of fighting back against it, I almost wonder if her direction in the storyline would mean an end to the production of the joy pills, while the other guy, the huskier guy with the big beard, seems to take a bit more of a directly antagonistic role against the government, one that many would honestly view as an acts of terrorism or things of that sort. Um, where he absolutely refuses, but it does seem that he ends up in one of the trailers actively discussing the loss of truth in the world, which has me wondering if he was one of those like higher ranking government officials that started that process and then turned around against it because he saw all the harm it was causing. Again, this is just speculation based on what we saw in the trailers and what we're being told here, which that speculation does give me a little bit of a hunger for the game. I am genuinely interested to see how this unfolds. A dystopia of your very own. In We Happy Few, no two playthroughs are alike. While the citizens of Wellington Wells are always will always want to ensure that you've taken your joy, the procedurally generated world will ensure that your experience with We Happy Few is different and unique. Wellington Wells is never quite like you remember it. Now, in a way, I know these procedurally generated things, they can be very hit or miss with how well it's executed. But at the same time, with it telling us that it's never quite like you remember it, it almost has me thinking that if you were to go through multiple playthroughs and the city gets remixed, instead of having a static city map, it does seem to be a potentially interesting thing where, how to phrase this, your memory of it could be a part of that narrative and your perception having been warped by previous playthroughs the way the character's perception of reality would be warped by the drugs. Take your joy or don't, the choice is yours. You customize your We Happy Few experience. Choose from a range of difficulties for new and experienced players. Uh, Masochistic, try permadeath. You collect recipes, scavenge items, and craft dozens of weapons, tools, and devices. You creep, crush, or conform your way through puzzles and encounters and fight with the crazy weapons you can craft, or fight with your bare hands and don't kill anyone. So you have a lot of options for how you approach the game and how passive or aggressive you want to take things. So that's kind of a cool thing to see, and I almost wonder like how that might deviate into possibly different endings depending on what directions you take with the character, how aggressive you take things. Is there an ending where maybe you change the course of the world, or is there only a singular storyline? Um, which I think if we get into the DLC, this might be a good time for that before we go to the overall game analysis. I did pull them up and tabbed. Now, there is a singular bundle of the DLC with a season pass, and the season pass is fortunately still available, even though originally the season pass had released as a kind of pre-order for all the DLC. Now, some games you look at the DLC and you're like, this seems like it really should have been included content. But when we look at this, we're going to see that the DLC, I personally think, is set up in a way where each of them is their own storyline tacked onto the world, as opposed to being things that should have been included with the base game. It does feel like you're getting more game with the way these are presented. For example, the first one, Roger and James in They Came From Below. I mean, how do you look at a title card that's written like that and not do it in like that cheesy sci-fi thriller voice? Because that is exactly how this is presented. In the first piece of handcrafted season pass content, James and Roger return. I wonder if you meet them in the base game. In an all new We Happy Few story, Wellington Wells stands besieged by a robot uprising, but the mechanized menace isn't the only thing in threatening to tear our pair apart. Play as Roger and team up with your boyfriend James to find Dr. Faraday, explore a vast underground laboratory, and discover the source of the robot invaders before it's too late. Now it adds this fresh content to We Happy Few, a brand new story in Wellington Wells with a classic sci-fi twist, adventure into handcrafted new areas like Dr. Faraday's secret laboratory. You test the metal of a cadre of new robot foes, take up shining new weapons and tools like the transforming ray gun and the time slowing chrono bomb. Uncover the puzzling purpose of the curious device and feel clever doing it. Stay focused on the mission. There's no time to craft, eat, or sleep in a town on the fritz. And you challenge yourself in a new boss fight unlike any other in We Happy Few. Now, the DLC, in fact, all the DLCs have their own trailer, which minute to minute and a half long for each of them. I would highly recommend going and checking those out on your own too. And their own screenshots that showcase the robots, the scenes, a lot of the robots. And in fact, there's even more screenshots in this one than there are in the We Happy Few base game. But then again, with as much trailer footage as we get for the base, I can see why they skipped out on the screenshots for that one. But they do show, again, quite a bit of stuff here. Robots going and attacking that town square situation. But again, this time you're playing as these two characters that are not mentioned in the base game of We Happy Few. So this is kind of like its own spin-off story, which is one of the reasons that it makes sense as kind of an add-on DLC that you play separate from that story. It doesn't even appear to be tied in. And the second DLC, Lightbearer, also appears to have that same motif of not being tied into that main story of those three original characters. This time, in the second piece of handcrafted season pass content, you play as Wellington Wells' most beloved rock star, Nick Lightbearer, in a brand new story. Heartthrob artist and personal train wreck, Nick Lightbearer is adored by legions of fans until disaster strikes when a Nick centric fan convention is plagued by a string of murders. So you're a rock star in a murder mystery. When all signs point to him as the killer, how will he reconcile the disturbing overlap between his own blackouts and the killings? Lightbearer adds fresh combat, puzzles, and more to We Happy Few. You get a new story full of sex, drugs, and rock and roll with a Wellington Wells twist. Check out new handcrafted environments such as Nick's favorite music shop. You wield Nick's guitar or throw golden records to fend off fans and paparazzi with the power of music. Again, this is one of those things that seems like it would fit right into the setting, especially given that this is the kind of entertainment that a dystopian setting is going to want to latch onto to distract the masses from whatever actual poverty and problems are going on. You cut right to the rock. You're busy enough being a star without adding eating, sleeping, and crafting to the mix. So it does seem like for these DLCs, they forego the more in depth, possibly stealth driven aspects of the game where you're trying to collect resources and craft things and go for that. It's more of a blast through this story and have a good time doing it, which I feel like maybe I could see that being possibly good, possibly bad, where it's like I don't know how much of the actual original game is removed by this, but considering that it is a DLC that we'll get to the pricing in a little bit, but the DLC is also not on an exorbitant price compared to the base game, so may still very well be welcome. Finally, we have again, its own trailer and some wonderful screenshots where you see your fans and groupies in looks like your fan base has its own uniform, complete with the smile and the makeup and everything. We got churches, we got museum, we got full blown rocker situations, and the graphical presentation in these screenshots again amazing. Now, finally, the third DLC, We All Fall Down. Now, you can't take a look at this title card and tell me that this doesn't look like some Indiana Jones shit. However, twist, the visual motif is there, and a little bit of the action sequence may look like it's there from the trailer, but aside from the whip, the storyline is very much not an Indiana Jones thing, I think. You've taken your joy, but now it's time to tear it all down in this final piece of handcrafted season pass content. Play as Victoria Bing, get a grip on her whip, and get the last word on the story of Wellington Wells. So it seems like this one is actually the conclusion to the story of the city. As Victoria reckons with her own withdrawals, the city slides deeper into joy shortage and disorder. Again, this is the kind of thing that makes me think if one of those original three main characters, the chemist, if she was responsible for the creation of joy, but then goes against her own creation and halts the flow of the drug into the city, I can see how that would lead directly into this being a major point of the story and the lore of the city. As it has always been Victoria's duty to help keep things proper, but the closer she looks, the deeper the rot seems to run. We all fall down climbs to the highest heights of We Happy Few gameplay, yet tour Wellington Wells at its absolute most dire. We do see in the trailer and the screenshots here that seems to be a lot more a lot more violence and strife in the city. People going hungry and starving, people, running, not just refusing to take their pills, but running out of them, which having them come out of that high and actually see the world as it is and be hungry and everything, I can see how that would pretty much drive them to that insanity. Crack the whip across the face of your foes in a snappy new take on combat, or take the stealthy route with a shocking new dart gun. Take the high road as you climb across the rooftops in a new stealthy spin on We Happy Few exploration. Maybe that feels a little bit of Assassin's Creedy. Stick it to the system swiftly. There is no time for eating, sleeping, and crafting. So, like the other DLCs, you throw out the eating, sleeping, crafting to basically have a blitzing rush of a story. It seems to be how they're explaining it. But even if the gameplay is significantly shorter than the core game of We Happy Few's story events, it is still an incredible thing. And we do see that there's multiple uses of the whip. You have a little bit of a whip and go Spider-Man style, it looks like here, a little bit of scaffolding to balance on. Dude practically looks like Pyro from Team Fortress over here. Again, they did mention the dart gun in there, so that's probably your little stun gun to get people at a distance. Whole lot of everything going on here that frankly it does look like it's a lot to look forward to. So that's our store description, including the store description of the DLC. And frankly, it is incredible to look at. They present so much information without completely overloading it. And I know that this episode is already stretching a little bit on the long side just because of how much there was to go through, but we've got to get through part 4 with our overall game analysis. Now with the graphics, the game being from 2018 is not exactly the most graphically robust game that it looks like, but at the same time, it does its job serviceably. It looks like they went out of their way to try and be not entirely cartoonish, but it looks like they did not want to go with full photorealism in their graphics. They didn't want to go like hyper texture and everything. They wanted it to have a little bit of a stylized flair with the expressiveness and the motions and the animated nature of the characters. That really comes out here. The environments do have that dark, dreary drab to them, but again, this is a dystopian setting, and even the colorful scenes that probably are mostly played out when you're under the influence of the joy, that there's still like that little bit of grunge to it, where it looks a little off when you're seeing the colorful settings, but it does have that visual juxtaposition. The sound design, from what I've seen in the trailers, does appear to be diverse and extremely well crafted. We have happy music, we have a little bit of a somber music, and there's a mix going on in there, which tells me that it's likely tied into your character's mental state depending on whether you've taken your pills or not. Gameplay. Now, the gameplay we see we do see a lot of cinematics, but the gameplay does look like it's mostly walking around and running around, but they do tell us that there's a lot of crafting. We do see the characters using a handful of different kinds of weapons and tools to affect enemies and the environments around them. We're told that there's crafting, item collecting, all that kind of stuff, which does give me something to reasonably think that, okay, maybe there's enough space for me to look around and explore and find things, and I would hope that I am rewarded for doing so. We don't see a lot of how the story driven part of the gameplay goes. If there's dialogue trees or options like there are with more narrative driven games, or if it's more action flash in the pan thing, maybe a la Half Life? In fact, with one of the DLCs, I very much got Half Life kind of vibes from it, where the robots seem to be coming through a portal due to a lab accident. Anybody played those old games, like you might know what I'm talking about. Now, with the UI and the menus, we do see a snapshot of a skill tree in one of the trailers. But outside of that, we really don't get a lot of menu visuals. And honestly, I don't know how necessary the menu visuals are. It does seem like most of the game is spent in the world's motion and maybe not in inventory management, although I would still maybe want to see what the crafting menu looks like. But in this kind of situation, it's not the worst thing in the world where the only one or two things I can think of that would even have a menu in the game, if I don't see it, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go on the hope that the menu is well enough designed and visually easy to navigate. Now, the pricing of the game. The base price for We Happy Few. By the way, that visual right there, just can I just get a screen? That visual right there just kind of sums up the game. You got yourself being held down. I know I just kind of leave the trailer going when I'm finishing up this part, but I feel like this sums up the game very much. You have your police, you have your inspector, you have bystanders. Even the bystanders are hell bent on you taking your medicine. And you're just like, I don't want it. But anyway, full price for the game, $60, which honestly struck me as a surprise. I had originally thought that this came from like maybe a smaller indie studio, even with the 3D graphics and everything. And based on, again, my limited perception of what I had seen of this in 2018, since it only came like within a few minutes of YouTube footage of somebody starting the game, not even trailers or anything like that. I did not know that I was going to be looking at a $60 full price game, although at the time of recording this and publishing, it is on sale for $15. Now, it's not going to be on sale for long. This sale is going to be gone before we know it. In fact, I think it's just a very short-term sale in general. But we are going to discuss the pricing and the bundle pricing going on here. So, full base game, $60. The season pass is full price, $20 on top of that. Now, I feel like $60. I personally feel like $60 is not a price that I would personally pay for this, especially with the game having been from 8 years ago at this point. But not because I don't think the game is entire. I don't think the game is unworthy of that $60 price tag. I just think that with the time that's passed, a drop in its base price is probably warranted. And then the $20 DLC on top of that for the entire collection of DLC. Reminder. The DLCs separately, I believe, were $8 a piece. Yes, $7.99 a piece for each one if you get the DLC separately. They're listed on the main page, and you can see all these prices laid out there too. There's the We Happy Few, $15 for the sale price, $6 full price, with $20 DLC, and there is a soundtrack. You can get the bundle with the soundtrack as well in the digital goods bundle. Speaking of which, that's the one I did not look at, was the digital goods bundle. soundtrack, phone wallpapers, desktop wallpapers, ringtones, a lyric sheet so you can sing along. And it includes songs from the game as well as the Make Believes, a tailor made boy band playing tribute to the swinging sounds of. So, okay, so you can actually get like full blown soundtracks and albums, and based on the music that I heard in the trailers, they're not all like the bops that I'd be jamming my head to, but there was some clear effort and work put into it, especially as we see this list here of 48 tracks loaded up into that. All for wow, and this thing okay, the digital goods package also $8. So 3 DLCs plus the digital goods package with wallpapers, artwork, and music. Um, $8 even just for the soundtrack for that is actually kind of worth. Uh, but again, we're looking at the different kind of buying options that we have here. The season pass itself has the DLCs. We Happy Few, the season pass, which comes with all three of these, that's $20. So if you were to get each of those $8 DLCs separately, that's 24. You're saving $4 just getting the season pass if you catch this full price. There's also a digital deluxe edition which comes with the season pass and that digital goods bundle with all the soundtrack and everything for 21.97. So basically an extra $2 and you get that, well, 87.97 altogether. Correct. Let me correct myself on that. So the full price is basically all three things just added together, no discount, 87.97. On sale though, it has been pulled down like everything on sales for 75% off. 21.97 until March 26th of 2026. Again, this sale isn't going to last long from the time this video's up, so if you're seeing this and it's still on sale, I think that $22 for the entire digital deluxe bundle is entirely worth it. To the point that I am very tempted to just snap on that. Now, if my wife bursts through that door and says, "You better not fucking dare," then I probably won't fucking dare. But otherwise, for what we're being promised, that is quite a lot of content for a very full game, plus the bonus content on top of that. I have a hard time stomaching the $88 price tag. Again, not because I don't think it's entirely worth it. Anybody who's played this game would probably tell me whether or not they think that price is worth it. I do think that the game can be worth a $6 price tag, but being 8 years old at this point and given my own time and budget, it's a little harder for me to justify me spending that on my account. But if you catch it on a sale like it's in here, that is an incredible value. I will have to try and base my score, like when I actually score the game, though. I'm going to have to try and base it on that full price. And I think the full price is actually going to be the main thing that lowers the score because the presentation of the game on Steam is genuinely incredible. And like I've said before in this review, I am I am enticed. I am interested in the setting, the art, the music, the style. The story that they've presented here is very well done and well put together, at least as far as the store page's presentation. Now, this is judging by the cover, so we are reviewing this and scoring this based on the store page. Whether or not the game actually meets those expectations once somebody hits that purchase button and starts playing, that is up to you as the player to decide. But as far as the store goes, I am scoring We Happy Few a very favorable 8 out of 10. Mainly again because of that pricing. The $60 game does seem like it offers a lot, but then when you bump that up to $80 with the season pass, it becomes a little harder to go and spend that much money on something when, depending on your time and your budget as an individual, that's it can be a lot, it can be a lot to swallow, because $80, that can really eat into somebody. Not everybody has that kind of gaming budget. But I do believe that the game can be worth that amount if you have that kind of budget, that kind of expendable income that you can go ahead and put towards it. Compulsion Games looks like they really knocked it out of the park with the tone, the atmosphere, the setting, the story, the gameplay. Everything looks immaculately presented. I did mention before how I have reviewed another game from them before, South of Midnight, and that game also gave me a huge a huge bump in that direction of, they look like they know what they're doing when they're setting the tone and how they present their game. Now, I don't remember word for word exactly what I said in that review, but I do remember, I do have that memory of having very positive reactions about it. And given that, going from Louisiana to Britain, like they are portraying the settings, that like the different settings in their tone and everything incredibly well. But again, like I said, an 8 out of 10. I feel like if the base price, like if the full price was not $80 for the game plus the DLC, it would probably go up. But on a with it at its current sale, where you can get the base game, the season pass for all the DLC, plus basically what equates to a miniature digital art book and a full soundtrack for $22, that sounds like an incredible value. So Compulsion Games, honestly, you guys knocked it out of the park. And I know one of the other things I almost glossed over, the way the trailers presented the game. So many times in these other reviews, I have mentioned how the trailers seem to be backwards, and I'm pretty sure the trailers are a little backwards here, considering the Accolades trailer is clearly going to be the one that's what journalists and streamers and stuff are going to be saying about the game, which is going to be come long after the initial announced trailer. But the way that these trailers present their information even makes the accolades in the story trailer look like entry level trailers for viewers to enjoy, as opposed to other games where they front load DLC and update trailers, and then the base game trailers are all the way in the back. In this one, they tell you there's the DLC. The DLC gets its own page for its own trailer. They don't bog down the main page with the DLC trailers when so many other games do that. And I do appreciate that they go and separate that, where you see the DLC and you're like, you know what, let me take a look at those. Click on each one individually. You can do a little research that way and see, oh, it's got its own trailer, its own screenshots. They're not all repeating the same content. That's another thing that We Happy Few's store page did very well when I was looking through this. If anything, it's just the only reason that 8 out of 10 is because an $80 price tag is a little hard for me to personally swallow. Again, if anybody out there disagrees and says that the game is fully worth that $80 price tag for base game and the season pass at full price, by all means, let me know if like that you believe it's worth it. Uh, I do like I say this always at the end of the reviews, that when I'm expressing these views and these feedback, they are my own opinions. So anybody with differing opinions, absolutely make yourselves known. We always respect that incoming respectful feedback, even sometimes less than respectful feedback. I do find them amusing. I have seen comments where people say that this whole premise of doing reviews is stupid, and honestly, I agree. I agree with you guys. But I'd like to know what people think about who have played this, or if this is the first that you've seen this and you're being like, "Oh, it's $20, snap." That seems like a lot of value for the kind of price it is. Let me know if you jump on it, if you play it. I know I've done some other reviews where people looked at things I've done like the Insane Bundle. I had a couple people mention that they played through some of those games, and that was a trip too. Hopefully, if people jump on this one after this review, I'm hoping your experience is far more positive than the Insane Bundle. Uh, but honestly, yeah, I need to go ask my wife about this because this setting here is incredible, and I'm almost wondering if it's something she'd like too, because there is some wild stuff going on in this game. And like I said, Compulsion Games, you absolutely nailed the presentation, and I appreciate you for at least getting that part right.